Wow. She couldn't back herself out of that one. You go into the restaurant, she's being fed by another man. Yeah, you're cheating. I mean, the fact that you lied about going out with your girlfriends and you're out with another man. Yeah, you lied to me and you're cheating. It's over. We're done.
Subject: my wife lied about dinner with friends. I caught her being fed by another man. Hey, true story. I got your channel info from a buddy of mine who went through something similar, and he told me if I ever wanted to get my story off my chest, this was the place to do it. So here I am. My name's Chad. I'm 38 years old. Right now, I live in a little cabin up in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. I chop my own wood, have spotty cell service, and drink my morning coffee with a view of snow-capped peaks. But not long ago, I was married, living in a nice house in the suburbs, and completely oblivious to how much one lie can change your life. This is the story of how I found out my wife was cheating on me, how she tried to stop the divorce with chaos, manipulation, and straight up harassment, and how I walked away from it all and found peace living semi-off grid. How we met. A quiet beginning. I met my ex-wife Letitia back in 2014. We were both working for the same logistics company. She was in HR, and I worked on the fleet management side. We didn't talk much at first, just the occasional elevator ride or break room chat, but then we had both got assigned to help coordinate the company's annual charity 5K, and we hit it off. Letitia was funny, smart, gorgeous in that quiet librarian kind of way. Long dark hair, always pulled into a low bun, big brown eyes, and she laughed at all my dumb jokes. I thought I hit the jackpot. Things moved fast between us. Within 6 months, we moved in together. A year after that, we were married in a small ceremony just outside of Portland. I was all in. I thought she was too. But looking back now, I can see the red flags. There were always little things that didn't sit right. The red flags I ignored. Letitia had this habit of getting real secretive with her phone. I chalked it up to being private. Everyone deserves some privacy, right? But she'd do things like put her phone face down when I walked into the room. Or she'd get up and leave the table mid-dinner to take calls outside. Once I saw a message pop up from a guy named Tasha with a kiss emoji. I asked about it, and she claimed it was an inside joke with a female friend. I let it go. Another red flag was how she always had to be busy. She'd be out with her girls almost every weekend, but I never met any of them. When I'd suggest doing a double date or just having a chill night in, she'd make up some excuse about how her friends didn't really do couple stuff. I convinced myself it was normal, that she needed her independence, that I was overthinking. Truth is, I was scared of pushing her away. The change after the miscarriage. Letitia got pregnant in late 2018. We were both thrilled. She bought baby books. I started building a crib in the garage. We were all in. But then, one night in December, she started bleeding. We rushed to the ER, and just like that, it was over. She shut down after that, and I mean completely. She stopped going to therapy. Wouldn't talk about it, stopped being affectionate, sex disappeared. I tried to be patient. I told myself grief has no timeline, but after a year of walking on eggshells, I started to wonder if she was still in the marriage at all. She started sleeping in the guest room, stopped making eye contact, stopped calling me babe. She wasn't just grieving, she was checked out. And again, I told myself I had to wait it out, that it was part of the process. But it wasn't grief anymore, it was distance, and it kept growing. The gut feeling I couldn't shake. Fast forward to mid-2022. Out of nowhere, Letitia started going out more. She said she was reconnecting with friends from before we met. I asked who. She named some vague high school friends and a coworker I'd never heard of. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. She told me she was going out to dinner with Kim and Janelle. Said they were catching up at some fancy restaurant in Seattle. I told her to have fun and not to drive drunk. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and left. but something didn't sit right. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the perfume she hadn't worn in years. Maybe it was the way she smiled, like she wasn't thinking about me at all. Maybe it was just 6 years of gut instinct finally breaking through my denial. So I did something I'd never done before. I checked the location sharing app we'd set up years ago after she got lost hiking. I never used it, and honestly, I forgot it even existed. But that night, I opened it. She wasn't at the restaurant she said she was going to. She was at a trendy fusion place on the opposite end of the city. A place I knew she used to love taking dates back before we met. So I got in my truck and drove. I caught her being fed by another man. I parked down the street and walked past the big window out front. I told myself I was being crazy, that maybe her friends changed plans, that maybe she'd explain everything. But there she was, candles on the table, holding hands across the table with some guy I'd never seen before. He was feeding her a bite of dessert like they were on The Freaking Bachelor. And she was laughing, not politely, like belly laughing, the kind of laugh I hadn't seen from her in over 2 years. I didn't go in. I just stood there, frozen. I took a photo with my phone, not out of revenge, but because I knew she was going to lie. I knew it in my bones, and I needed proof, not for a judge, not even for a lawyer, but for myself. So I'd stop doubting the truth when I was finally face to face with it. I went home and sat on the couch in silence for hours. When she got home, she acted like nothing happened. I asked, "How was dinner with Kim and Janelle?" She smiled and said, "Good." We caught up on so much. I didn't even show her the picture. I just nodded and said, "Glad to hear it." That night, I started looking for divorce lawyers, the divorce process, and the harassment. The next morning, I contacted a firm that specialized in family law. My lawyer, Greg, was a quiet, sharp guy who told me right away, "Don't confront her yet. We're going to serve her clean. No fights, no drama. Let the paperwork do the talking." So I played along for 2 weeks while Greg got everything in order. But Letitia must have sensed something, because her behavior flipped from distant to strangely sweet. She brought me coffee in bed, tried to initiate sex. I couldn't even pretend anymore. She got served while she was at work, and that's when the chaos began. I went no contact on my lawyer's advice. We were still living in the same house, but I stayed in the garage apartment while I looked for a rental. She blew up my phone every day, crying, screaming, leaving voicemails saying I was destroying our marriage over a misunderstanding. Then she started showing up at my job. Once she tried to leave a handwritten letter on my windshield that ended with, "If I can't have you, no one will." I gave that one straight to my lawyer. She even contacted my mother to try and mediate. My mom, bless her heart, told her to take a hike. The divorce hearing circus. The divorce hearing was an absolute circus. Letitia came in with a brand new lawyer and a folder of made-up evidence that I was emotionally abusive. She claimed I was cold, unavailable, and neglectful, especially after the miscarriage. The irony is that I was the one holding her while she cried herself to sleep. I cooked for her, cleaned for her, took care of everything. Greg shut her down with one sentence. "Your Honor, we have geotagged photographic proof that she lied about her whereabouts and was engaged in an extramarital affair." Her face went white. Suddenly, she wanted to settle. We agreed she could keep the house. I didn't want it anymore. It was poisoned with memories. I walked away with my truck, my tools, and my sanity. Life in the mountains, my off-grid rebirth. A month later, I found a listing for a small off-grid cabin in the Cascades. No running water, propane for heat, wood stove, compost toilet. Sounded perfect. I bought it outright with the money I had left and moved in with just a bedroll, a chainsaw, and a box of books. The first night, I didn't sleep much. The silence was overwhelming, but over time, it became peaceful, healing. Now I spend my days chopping wood, hiking, reading, and working remotely a few hours a week doing logistics consulting. My internet is satellite-based and patchy, but it's enough to stream YouTube, and that's how I found your channel. If you're interested, I'd love to share more about my life out here, what it's like living semi-off-grid, how I healed from betrayal, how I finally learned that peace is better than passion if passion comes with poison. Thank you for reading this, and thank you for giving guys like me a place to speak the truth. Chad. Update. Hey, true story. Chad here again. I can't thank you enough for accepting my story. As promised, I wanted to write you with the details about how I ended up in this little slice of peace I now call home. My cabin in the mountains of Washington isn't just a house, it's a lifeline. A daily reminder that there's still beauty in the world after betrayal. This email might be long, but I want to give your viewers everything. How I found the property, why I didn't go fully off grid, the pros and cons, the work it takes, and what I'd recommend for other guys thinking about getting away from it all. If this helps even one man find peace, it's worth writing. The search for peace. After the circus show, that was my divorce, which your audience now knows all about. I found myself stuck between two extremes. I could stay in town, surrounded by memories and small talk and whispers, or I could disappear. I chose the latter. I started by browsing online listings in places I'd never even heard of. I had 3 requirements: remote, but not so remote I couldn't get supplies, or cell service. Affordable, this had to be something I could pay off fully. Land. I wanted trees, a creek, and something I could build on. Eventually, I found a listing in Stevens County, Washington. 10 acres, partially forested, an unfinished cabin with solar potential. It was like someone had started the dream and given up. I saw potential. I saw my future. I drove out to see it in person, and the moment I stepped on that land, I knew. It was quiet in a way that felt alive. Birds, wind, no traffic. It didn't feel like I was running away. It felt like I was finally standing still. Fixing the place up. The cabin was basically a shell. No insulation, no power, no plumbing. Just walls, a roof, and potential. Over the next 14 months, I put everything I had into it. Power. I went semi-off-grid with a solar power system. 6 300-watt panels feeding into a battery bank. I can run lights, my fridge, laptop, and a few appliances. In winter, I have a propane generator as backup. I didn't want to go 100% off-grid because being able to work remotely and stay sane during long winters meant internet and occasional backup power were a must. Water. I put in a rainwater catchment system with food-grade tanks. I also dug a shallow well. Water gets filtered before it ever hits my tap. I use a composting toilet, and my gray water goes to the garden. I bathe with a propane-heated shower. Hot showers off rainwater feels like a luxury. Heat. I installed a wood stove that heats the entire cabin. I learned to split and season wood myself. My mornings start with lighting the stove, brewing coffee, and watching mist roll off the trees. Better than any alarm clock. Food. I started with a small raised bed garden. Potatoes, onions, carrots, lettuce. I learned to can and dehydrate. I fish when the season allows. I'm not a full-time farmer, but knowing that I can grow food with my own hands is one of the most empowering things I've done. Daily life. People think living in a cabin means you're just relaxing all the time. Nah, this life requires you to be present. Mornings up at 6:30, light the stove, check the water levels, make coffee, tend to the garden, in season. Midday, I split wood or work on maintenance. I also do remote work, some freelance design, and consulting. I keep internet via satellite. It's not perfect, but it lets me earn a living. Evenings. Cook dinner, usually from scratch. Maybe fish, read books, or watch a movie I've downloaded. Winters can be brutal. Snow piles up and roads can be blocked. I learned to stockpile food, rotate propane, and stay warm without relying on help. That part was the biggest shift, knowing that if something goes wrong, it's on me to fix it. But it's also made me sharper, stronger, quieter in my spirit. Why I didn't go 100% off grid? I flirted with the idea, completely unplugged. No internet, no backup generator, no phone. But here's the thing, I wasn't trying to escape reality. I was trying to escape the noise. There's a big difference. I kept internet because it lets me work and communicate. I kept a generator because Washington winters are no joke, and I didn't want to freeze trying to prove something. Going 90% off grid gave me independence without putting me in danger or poverty. And for men thinking about this path, don't get sucked into the fantasy of living like a pioneer unless you really understand the work. There's no shame in keeping one foot in the modern world. It's about balance. Recommendations for men looking for peace. If you're a man who's been through betrayal, trauma, or just plain exhaustion from the modern grind, I highly recommend semi-off-grid living. But here's what you need to know. Start with your why. Don't run from pain. Run toward peace. Learn basic skills. Plumbing, solar systems, wood chopping, water filtration. YouTube University is your friend. Location matters. Pick a county where the laws don't strangle you with permits and restrictions. Avoid HOA areas like the plague. Budget, honestly. My setup cost around $32,000, including land, tools, solar, and materials. It's not cheap, but it's not unreachable either. Have a backup plan. Whether it's a nearby town or someone who can check in, don't isolate yourself completely. Don't expect to find yourself. What you will find is space to be yourself. The cabin doesn't fix you. It just removes the noise so you can hear your own thoughts again. Journal, read, reflect. You'll have time. Use it well. Closing thoughts. Living in this cabin saved me. Not because it's perfect, but because it gave me permission to start over. My ex tried to ruin me, gaslit me, lied to my face, slept with a man she met online, took me to court like I was the problem, and I carried that bitterness with me out here. But the quiet, it demands honesty. One night after a storm knocked the power out and I was huddled by candlelight, I realized she doesn't exist here. Her drama, her lies, her chaos, none of it has power where the only sounds are wind and coyotes. This life isn't for everyone, but if you're hurting, if you're lost, if you're angry and tired and sick of the noise, consider it. Even a weekend retreat in a cabin can change your perspective. If your viewers want more info, I can break down how to install solar, filter rainwater, build raised beds, or even how to finance something like this without selling your soul. I'd be honored to help. Thanks again for letting me share. I owe you more than I can say. Stay solid, Chad. Another follow-up. Hey, true story, it's Chad again. This email is another update from me. This one's a little different. Still from the mountains, still from the heart, but with a new chapter that's quietly unfolding out here in the pine-covered ridges of Washington State. I want to share it with your audience because I think it might offer a sense of hope, or at least a reminder that healing isn't always a lonely road, even if it starts that way. To get to it plain and simple, I've met someone. Before anybody jumps to conclusions, no, I'm not rushing into anything. This isn't a rebound, a whirlwind romance, or some Hollywood love story. This is about a connection, a grounded, mature, slow-burning connection. And it's been a surprisingly good thing. Let me back up and walk you through how it happened. So, the nearest town to where I live is about a 45-minute drive, maybe 30 if the roads are dry and the old 4Runner is behaving. I make supply runs once or twice a month. Bulk food, propane refills, the occasional tool or part for the solar panels, that kind of thing. On one of those trips back in early spring, I stopped into the local feed store. They sell everything from chicken grit to handmade wool socks. It's a real slice of life kind of place. That's where I saw her. She was standing by the seedling racks, picking through onion starts and tomato trays. I noticed her boots first, dusty, worn, and with those little bits of pine needles stuck in the laces, the kind you only get from walking real forest trails, not city parks. She looked like she belonged out here, like she didn't just play off grid. She lived it. Her name is Ava. We got to talking because we were both reaching for the same tray of heirloom tomatoes. No awkwardness, just easy conversation. She mentioned she lived not too far from me, about 7 miles as the crow flies, but it's a winding gravel road to get there. She lives in a tiny house she built with her brother a couple years ago. Rainwater catchment, composting toilet, solar power, and a little wood stove she said has been her best friend through the winters. She invited me to stop by sometime to trade seeds and check out her greenhouse setup. I waited a week. I didn't want to seem overeager. I figured if we crossed paths again, it was meant to be. Sure enough, the next Saturday I was in town again, and she was at the same place, this time picking up chicken feed. We ended up chatting again, and she offered coffee, real percolator coffee over a wood stove. Couldn't say no to that. I drove up to her place a few days later. It was humble and beautiful in the way things are when someone puts their soul into them. She has a tiny front porch with 2 chairs made from old pallets and a view that stretches across a valley of firs and maples. Her garden was already coming to life. Radishes, kale, some early carrots. Chickens wandering free, scratching around like little feathered lawnmowers. We talked for hours that day, about everything, about nothing, about living simply, about pain, about healing. She told me she went through a rough breakup a few years back. Not a divorce, but a deep betrayal. Different details, same ache. We both knew what it felt like to be burned by someone you gave your heart to. There was a quiet understanding between us that didn't need to be explained. Since then, we've become good friends. Sometimes we trade produce or borrow tools. Sometimes she stops by and we hike the ridge trail near my cabin. Other times I go over to her place and help patch things up when something breaks. We've kept things respectful, clear, and slow. Look, I'll be honest, I'm cautious. I told myself after the divorce I'd stay alone for a long while, maybe forever, and I meant it. But the truth is, the human spirit doesn't always want to be alone forever. It wants connection, even if that connection looks different than what you expected. Ava gets it. She understands the solitude because she lives it too. She doesn't judge me when I go quiet for a few days. She doesn't push for more than I'm willing to give. And I don't do that to her either. We're just present, in each other's orbits, comfortable. We talk about off-grid stuff a lot. She's the one who convinced me to try baking sourdough in my wood stove oven, and now I'm hooked. She helped me set up a better gray water system for my cabin so I can reuse it for garden irrigation. In return, I helped her install a backup battery array after a storm knocked her out for a few days longer than she liked. It's been a good, balanced friendship, something I didn't realize I needed. We both laugh at the fact that we met in a feed store over tomatoes. Life has a sense of humor like that. You think it's all ashes and dust, and then something small happens, and it reminds you there's still warmth left in the world. I don't know what the future holds. I'm not making any wild declarations. I've got my cabin, my routines, my healing, and that's still my priority. But I'd be lying if I said her presence hasn't made this mountain air feel a little lighter. For the men out there listening, especially the ones who've been through betrayal, heartbreak, or divorce, let me tell you something. You don't have to rush back into the world. You don't need to fill the silence with noise. But don't be afraid to stay open. Connection doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it comes as quietly as a woman handing you a cup of coffee on a porch surrounded by pine trees. Healing isn't linear. It zigzags. It surprises you. And once in a while, when you're not looking, It brings someone into your life who's walking a similar path. So that's where I'm at now, living in my cabin, hiking, reading, learning new skills, tinkering with solar power upgrades, and yeah, sharing coffee and conversation with someone who gets it. If you in the audience are interested, I'd be happy to write more about the dynamics of balancing solitude with the connection out here. It's a different rhythm. It's not for everyone, but it's peaceful and honest. I think a lot of men could benefit from that. Thanks for reading. Thanks for giving guys like me a voice. Until next time, chat.
OP, I'm glad you moved on and I'm glad you found peace, man. Thanks for sharing all that information. That's pretty cool, guys. Anyone listening, are you guys into that? Like off grid or living in rural areas? Like I'm very much into that. The whole, growing your own food and having your own land. I think all that stuff is so cool. Salute to you, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing your story and your thoughts. Guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Let him know what you think about this in the comments. And if you want to send in a story, send it to truestorynation@gmail.com. Here, I'll put it on the screen. That is truestorynation@gmail.com. I'm going to catch you guys at the next one.